Today we're looking at the causes of the War of 1812. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out the questions down in the description. So in order to understand the causes of the War of 1812, we first have to look over to Europe and see what was going on there at the time. In 1803, France and Britain officially went to war with one another as part of what is known as the Napoleonic Wars. Remember, in the wake of the French Revolution, Napoleon Bonaparte had risen to power in France and was basically conquering all of Europe. In fact, Napoleon even had his eyes on conquering North America as well, but that's a whole nother story that would actually lead to the Louisiana Purchase, and in order to learn more about that, you can check out one of my other videos. But nonetheless, Britain and France were at war, which put America in kind of an awkward situation because we had trade connections with each country. The United States officially declared that we had neutral rights, or basically the right to sail the sea without taking a side, but very quickly, American trade ships began to get seized by the French and British naval forces. But the British seizing of ships especially angered Americans as the British began to practice what was known as impressment. Impressment was forcing sailors to serve in the British Navy, or really basically kidnapping sailors and putting them into the British Navy. Estimates are between 1793 to 1812, 15,000 American sailors were impressed or kidnapped by the British Navy. Of course, the British argued, claiming that many of these sailors had deserted British ships and had gone over to work on American ships for better wages, so they were obligated to serve for the British since they were technically British. So impressment was the primary issue Americans were upset about that would lead to the War of 1812. But there were other issues as well. Many Americans believed that the British were arming and encouraging Native American attacks on American settlements on the western frontier. And of course, the western frontier of America at this time was really the Mississippi River Valley. And of course, after Lewis and Clark's expedition to explore the land acquired in the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, lots of Americans were eyeing land out to the west. Furthermore, we had this incident of the attack on the Chesapeake. Now, the Chesapeake was an American trade ship that in June of 1807 set out from Norfolk, Virginia, heading for the Mediterranean Sea. As the Chesapeake got out to open water, it was stopped by a British warship, the HMS Leopard. The British captain of the Leopard demanded to search the Chesapeake. Well, of course, the crew of the Chesapeake, they didn't want to let them on board because they were fearful of being impressed or kidnapped, as I had talked about earlier. When the captain of the Chesapeake refused to allow the Leopard to board, the Leopard opened fire and killed 3 crew members of the Chesapeake. Americans were absolutely outraged by the attack, and the rally cry throughout the country became, "Remember the Chesapeake." Remember what the British had done to this innocent merchant ship. Some Americans began to argue that America needed to go to war with Britain. In Congress, there were new young congressmen that began to organize together into a group known as the War Hawks that were pushing for war. They were led by young congressmen such as Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, which of course, they'll be huge figures in American politics for the next 40 years. With the mounting calls for war, by June 1st of 1812, President James Madison sent a letter to Congress asking them to declare war. Remember, presidents cannot declare war. It is Congress that has that power, according to the Constitution. And so James Madison, in fact, is the first president in American history to request that Congress declare war. In his letter, his primary argument was, again, impressment and Native American attacks on the western frontier, which he blamed on the British. On June 18, 1812, Congress voted and officially declared war on Britain. But consider this, when the U.S. declared war, there were 6,700 soldiers in the American military. Compare that to over 240,000 in the British military. Plus, the British had the most powerful navy in the world compared to the U.S., who had basically almost no navy. So when we declare war, the United States is extremely unprepared to go to war. Lastly, a few confusing aspects of the War of 1812. It's called the War of 1812 because we declared war in 1812, but honestly the true fighting doesn't occur until 1814. The British were far too occupied with fighting Napoleon in Europe to pay any attention to this U.S. declaration of war. The British basically say, we'll get to you later when the United States declares war on them. Next, America's primary argument was impressment, but by the time we declare war on Britain, the British Parliament had already repealed or canceled the policy of impressment. But due to slow communication of the time, the United States did not know that. If we would have had a phone or maybe internet access back then, the whole war might have been avoided altogether. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.